Good evening and welcome to the Craftsmen Online Reading Room. My name is Brother Michael Arce, and I'll be serving as the digital Tyler for this evening's presentation. A reminder that tonight's program is recorded and will be uploaded to our website, which is craftsmenonline.com, and also shared on our YouTube channel for future playback. This evening's event is proudly sponsored by Right Worshipful Stephen Adam Rubin, Deputy Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of New York. Out of respect to our guests, we ask that you kindly keep your microphone muted until the question and answer portion of our program. You can use the chat feature to connect with other attendees or express that you have a question to ask. When recognized to speak, please state your name and lodge for the benefit of those attending. A quick programming note that the comments, opinions, and views that will be shared during this program are those of individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, concordant body, or a pendant body or Masonic authority. If you want to stay up to date on future events with Craftsmen Online, you can follow us on Facebook or sign up for our email updates at craftsmenonline.com. And now on to our program, the Craftsmen Online Reading Room. It's my great pleasure to introduce our host for this evening, Very Worshipful Michael LaRocco, Assistant Grand Lecturer for the Nassau District and Executive Director of the Livingston Library, and Right Worshipful Bill Edwards, Associate Member of the Lodge of Living Stones, founded by W. L. Wilmshurst in Leeds, England. My brother, the room is yours.
Welcome, everyone. If we could please bow our heads in a moment of prayer and contemplation. Great Architect of the universe, we thank you that Freemasonry is a fellowship. How grateful we are for the fraternal union we experience when we gather together as Masons. Guide us this day as we seek to conduct our affairs in ways which will benefit the spread of Masonic knowledge and light. We ask your guidance in your holy name. Amen. And brethren, please join me in a pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Good evening, brothers. Tonight we have as two of the other panelists, we have Right Worshipful Cliff Jacobs, 33rd degree. Cliff has been a Mason since 1988. He is a Magla first place winner. He was Master of Service City Geba Lodge 1009. He was the Assistant Grand Lecturer for 4th Manhattan District, and he's a member of all York Rite bodies, including the Allied Masonic degrees. He's been he's been a Scottish Rite member for 29 years and has served as two heads of the body, including being the Commander-in-Chief of the Valley of New York City, and is currently the Deputy's Rep for that valley. Cliff is a respectable member of the fraternity who has deep knowledge of esoteric spiritual matters, as well as doing the work in all parts of the craft. We also have Brother Jason Short. He was raised in July of 2022. He's a member of Aurora Grata Daystar Lodge, number 647. He's a member of the Scottish Rite at the Valley of New York City, and he's a Royal Arch Mason with the Nassau chapter number 109. Jason has a passion for studying the craft and is currently working on his HDA. We're watching Jason with his meteoric career in Masonry, and we have our eyes on him as well. So just to set forth the ground rules for tonight, first the panel will speak and be going back and forth for questions. And then at the end, we'll allow for questions and comments. And we're going to limit everyone to 1 or 2 statements so that we could share the time and have enough for everyone. Everyone will be on mute, and Brother Mike Arce will be controlling the mute towards the end. Right, Worshipful Bill?
Yep. Thank you. So the book that we chose to discuss, actually chapter 5 from that book, is called The Meaning of Masonry by W. L. Wilmshurst. And it's a fascinating book I first read back in the mid-1990s, becoming a Mason at that time. And I've read it numerous times, and Brother Michael LaRocco and I have been going back and forth this week with, it's one of these books where you read it and then you read it again and you read it again and you take away a whole nother interpretation of it. And what we're going to be exploring is Freemasonry in relation to the ancient mysteries tonight. So, Brother Michael, if you want to start off with the first question, jump us into discussion.
Yes, I cheated a little bit. In the beginning of the chapter, Wilmshurst mentions a couple of questions he's asking himself to see if the chapter itself answers. So we're going to use those as a format. So the first question for our panelists is, what was the nature of the ancient mysteries of which modern masonry purports to be the perpetuation? So, Rushville Cliff, would you like to take that first question?
Sure. I mean, I think the ancient mysteries was a system whereby men were trying to understand what was happening around them in nature. I think there was an awareness that there was something greater than themselves that was the source of all creation. And I think it was to try to understand nature and to solve some of what we would call the mysteries of life. In a nutshell, I believe that's what the ancient mysteries were trying to do. And also, I mean, to go a little deeper, it's to make a spiritual connection with the divine, with the creator, and a method or a way of sort of reconnecting with the Godhead, since that's who we are. We came into existence from the Godhead. There's a separation, and then the mysteries try to assist us in reconnecting. And I think Wilmshurst uses that term a few times in the chapter about reconnecting or reintegrating with the creator, and a philosophy that you find in a lot of esoteric organizations still in existence today.
Yes, thank you, Rushville Cliff. Brother Jason, would you like to add anything to that or answer that question as well?
Yeah. So Wilmshurst seemed to really ascertain that the ancient mysteries were a process of initiation, where there was this conferral or transfer of consciousness, and process of regeneration of the soul. And the process of initiation and this progression of man was sort of a way to bring us to a heightened state of consciousness from which humanity had once fallen away from. I mean, there are a number of different mystery schools and a number of different initiatory rites that existed in antiquity, and Wilmshurst does a good job of kind of leaning more into the Eleusinian, and then drawing a correlation to some of the early Christianity or early Christian structures that were laid out in about the late 5th to early 6th century. I really agree with him. I think that a lot of the ancient mysteries did something profound to the initiate, not only to bring them into the community like we see with Judaism, or even in the Christian rites of communion and confirmation, but this process of bringing you into a much more real existence that doesn't err materially. The Greeks in their process had a lesser mystery school, which is much more of an exoteric rite, much more of a publicly available process of purification and initiation into the journey that you would go on to. The next step would become these greater mysteries, which involved a level of instruction In the Eleusinian mysteries, the greater mysteries took the form of a 9-day ceremony that had a procession from Athens to Eleusis, had kind of a baptismal ceremony in the sea. It had a rite of purification and fasting that was then concluded with the taking of a kykeon, which is this sort of mixture drink that is believed to have been perhaps psychedelic. And through that process, those who have taken themselves seriously and those who are qualified would then be elevated to another plane of existence, essentially. Their minds would then be realigned to a world that is much more divine in nature and less rudimentary and materialistic as the profane.
Really, really, really interesting. Right Worshipful Bill, would you like to add your comments on that? Seems like this question is a good hot question. So
I like the what's been said, and I agree with what's been said. And I think what we'll get to it a little later, but the one word that Brother Cliff used was method, right? And then and Jason alluded to that as well. And I think that's one of the things that'll be interesting to see what we talk about through this is how one can apply a method or find a method within Masonry, right? To achieve this, because in a sense, I'm assuming the ancient mysteries had mentors, if you will use a modern term, right? They had initiates who would then help those coming through also become initiated. So I'm interested to hear a thought on that.
also, I forgot to mention, everyone, my apologies, is that some of the ground rules is that this is not a title lodge, so you have to govern yourself accordingly. So let's not breach that. Some of the things that struck about me, first I want to say that Wilmshurst's words in this chapter are so bold, but they resonate with so much profound truth, it's hard to deny. From this question, I see that what he was trying to say is that the ancient mysteries really are about teaching reincarnation. And the way he talked about it was that the reason why there has to be reincarnation is because this life is the only way you can improve yourself. Because when you go into the next life in heaven, it's a place of rest and refreshment, which reminds me of what, the junior warden is governing over that time. And so coming here is the only place a person can perfect their soul or purify the soul. And he was pretty bold about Christianity, saying that Christianity was supposed to be the amplification and the fulfillment of the teaching of the mysteries. And that at the same time, he says that the churches became more occupied with material management than they were for the spiritual mysteries teachings. But yet then he says that the Orthodox and the Roman liturgies still have them beautifully perfected, the symbols still in them. And I found that very, very profound. He also mentioned something I found is very interesting. He says that the sense of equality among all men has been greatly abused. He talks about how there's a hierarchy of beings where there's icons and archangels and angels, and how that is a pecking order in reality. And we have kind of disintegrated that in a sense by our demonstration of trying to express equality. Of course, equality is extremely important and a profound spiritual teaching, but I think what he was saying is that maybe, if he was around today, he might call it the Me Too movement. It's a little bit of a downgrading. I'm not really sure what he meant, but I'm sure he was really more talking about the spiritual realm. But I found that pretty impressive. He also mentions that in the 6th century, there was a suppression of the mysteries, and that how Masonry silently is literally saying that the background symbolism is to try to evoke brothers or men to remember what this is all about, that we're spiritual beings and that we're supposed to perfect the true body, which is the soul, and not necessarily the material body. So I thought that was really, 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 really profound. And I apologize, Bill, you had another question you wanted to move to. So what was that next question?
Well, just he says it here, right? Are we to be nothing more than, emphasizing a few moral principles and elementary truths, which we know already, right? So most of, what we talk about in Masonry, we already say that, it's often said that we take good men. So if we take good men, then good men already probably know what we're teaching, right? So it's that question of, well, then what else do we offer? And in studying Wilmshurst and his other writings as well, he at first just, sort of dismissed Masonry. And then he started to read into it more. And then that's where he came to this conclusion. And in the writing, he alludes to this, that, it may not be perfect in it, the way that it shares its light, but it is light that it still shares, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a, very interesting. So I'd just like to hear thoughts on that. That do we feel that the Masonry is a portal, if you will, to the mysteries? That by one coming into Masonry, that there's enough there, not revealing the quote unquote secrets or things that we can't share publicly, but that would help one become a true initiate. So Cliff, if you want to
Either Jason or
comments.
Cliff?
Or
Yeah, I
Cliff, or-
think
yeah.
it sort of brings to mind that portion of the ritual where we point to the volume of sacred law, and we admonish the candidate to faithfully, that his steps through life, that he faithfully is guided by the light he there shall find, and as he there shall find it. Nowhere along the way do we say that we're going to give the candidate the light. It's up to the candidate to find that light on their own. We don't just give it to them. They have to find it, which means they have to do the work. So I think in terms of in Freemasonry, a candidate's spiritual progression rests squarely with them. They have to do the work. And I think Freemasonry has elements of the ancient mysteries that can help a candidate, but we're not always very clear in pointing those aspects out to the candidate, whereby he can use Freemasonry along that path, which is why sometimes Masons gravitate towards other esoteric orders that's more practical, should I say.
Jason, you want to comment?
Yeah. So Wilmshurst had entered Masonry when he was a young man. He was 22 in 1890 when he was raised to being a Master Mason, and he was, as Bill had mentioned, discouraged by the craft because it seems like there were a lot of brothers who just treated the rituals as some sort of formal ceremony of induction into a supper club. And he couldn't see what the greater point of everything was if it weren't something that you had to dig much deeper to understand. And he was really inspired by that. He dug into the rituals, where he did start to find these correlations with the ancient mysteries, though not perfectly preserved in any shape or form. The structure was there, and some of the symbols and tenets of our craft had these really compelling parallels to much more esoteric doctrine that existed. Now, Wilmshurst was then in his 50s when he released The Meaning of Masonry in 1922, which is several years after Joseph Fort Newton's The Builders was released in 1914, which we can only imagine he was somewhat inspired by. And in that book, Joseph Newton gets into how the craft does draw from like the Roman collegiate schools and these ancient building traditions, and that there was some level of spiritual doctrine that was preserved, but he he kind of approaches it from more of an exoteric or known stance, and I think that really propelled Wilmshurst to dive to dive deeper into some of what Albert Pike kind of got into with his research into ancient Sanskrit and his delving into the ancient Hermetic mysteries and the Eleusinian mysteries that were preserved here. I think that it's very interesting to see that from 1890 to 2023, we still exist in a craft where the majority of people who come through the doors to be initiated into our rituals, I don't think may have reason or may have been inspired or encouraged in the right way, or have a desire to dig much deeper than the surface understanding of the craft. But the presentation that we are given as Masons and the three degrees of entered apprentice, fellow craft, master Mason, and then on into the Royal Arch, they really are the embodiment of the lesser mysteries and the greater mysteries. And if you really apply yourself to the teaching, if you really apply yourself to digging into the code and the secrets that are pertained there, you can't help but to reach a new level of reality. You can't help but to enter into a more philosophical and spiritually enlightened state of mind, which comes from divesting yourself of your vices, which comes from getting a control of your passions, and comes from also learning more about the world, not only in the material sense that Western philosophy and science has presented as factual, but what is the philosophical significance of these? I love the point in this chapter actually where Wilmshurst gets into the liberal arts and sciences and the four virtues and explains them not just on their surface level, but what was the deeper, the more noble and glorious presentation or understanding of them.
That's a great point, Jason. You know, to answer the question that Bill had just answered is that does Freemasonry have today, I guess if I'm answering correctly, the ability to communicate the mysteries, the ancient mysteries? You know, when I first went through the degrees, I'm going to say that I didn't think they did. I saw them, you know, I thought like, okay, so I'm not going to find any unique pieces of enlightenment at all here. But I think what had happened to me is that it was the affection of the brothers that drawn me in and kept me coming. And then I went to the Royal Arch degrees, and then I went to the Scottish Rite, and it was there that this triggered to me to realize that everything I was looking for, this very, very deep philosophical transformational system, was indeed there. And so it was more like the degrees themselves awakened me, they initiated me, but it was the communication with the other brothers that brought it to a very, very deep place. And so they were helping, and sometimes you go to a lecture or read an article, and then all of a sudden it makes a reference to a part of the degree. And it started to happen for me. I started to see it, you know, and I don't want to get into like this persona of esoteric eliteness. Like he literally says in it, a quote is, "Masonry today knows little of its true purpose." And I'm sure if he was around today, that his opinion would be magnified. So I'm not of a mind that if you don't understand deep esoteric information, you don't really know Masonry and you don't know what it's about and you're not a real Mason. Because frankly, to tell you the truth, there are some brothers that I know that have no interest in esoteric at all. Matter of fact, they have a disdain for it, but they would sacrifice their life for me. And there are those that have very profound, deep esoteric knowledge, but they're not very nice people. So I would say there's a lot to be said for that, but I would absolutely answer yes. But I've seen so many brothers that that miss the opportunity. So we have to catch them in programs like this, or if they dig deeper, if they read the books like the reading course, if they see lectures, or even see degrees in coordinate bodies. And again, you know, the coordinate bodies are not a competition to the symbolic lodge. They're an explanation of the depth of it. What really is there is absolutely profound. It always comes back down to the first 3 degrees. There's something that he quotes Plato, and Plato says, for those that are not initiated, when they die, they are thrust into the mire and the darkness. But those that are initiated are allowed to dwell among the gods. So my new question for the panel would be, what is initiation? Right, Worshipful Cliff?
Well, you said a lot of stuff, and it's a lot to unpack. I want to touch on something first and foremost. A lot of times we use the phrase esoteric Mason. I'm an esoteric, or I don't like the esoteric. But I think to be a Mason is to be esoteric. Freemasonry in and of itself is an esoteric science. Whether you realize it or recognize it as such, it already is. So I don't need to call myself an esoteric Mason because I think that's redundant. I'm a Freemason. The esoteric is pretty obvious if you ask me, because we definitely are different from the profane. The process of initiation, it's an awakening. And I've come to think Freemasonry as somewhat of an outer order. The esoteric stuff is there, but I think it's the front porch. And I think if you really want to understand Freemasonry, you do have to explore some other things. And then when you go back and you look at, you know, the symbolic lodge, it's like, aha, you know, a light goes off because you have traveled to other places, seen other things, and then you come back and you look at the symbolic lodge with new eyes. So I see the symbolic lodge really as kind of an outer order. If you're familiar with Rosicrucianism under its various names, then you know that usually there's an outer order and there's an inner order. Well, I think Freemasonry in and of itself is somewhat of an outer order, and it's up to the individual, the candidate, to go further, but they have to do that on their own.
Well said, well said. Brother Jason?
Yeah,
What is initiation?
I think that an initiation is a process of reincarnation. It's I think that, you know, Wilmshurst quotes the Apostle John in his saying, "I die daily," and in going through initiation, it gives us the opportunity to be reborn and then to die and be reborn again into a new, higher, elevated self. I think that in initiation, in the way that Wilmshurst presents it initially, is definitely more than just that. There are forms of initiation that are as simple as, all right, here's an orientation to this thing that we're doing. Welcome. Here's your badge. Here's your t-shirt. The buffet starts over there. I think that there is some of that exists out there, but the real heart of it is, I think, really becoming human. I think the process of going through an initiation is meant to instigate some sort of catharsis within the initiate that brings about a reincarnation of soul.
Before I ask Right Worshipful Bill for his opinion on what initiation is, I just wanted to add too that I love what you said, Jason, and what Right Worshipful Cliff said. But initiate also means to start. Like Cliff said before, you still have to do the work.
Mhm.
Right Worshipful Bill?
Sure. So when I was reading this, one of the words that I was thinking about was the idea of mysteries. And what does a mystery mean, or how is that different? That we often think in terms of secrets within Masonry. You know, what is the secret, right? Whereas mystery is something more. And I think just looking at the definition now, you know, in practices, skills, and lore particular to a particular trade or activity, and is regarded as baffling to those without specialized knowledge. And I think you know, that sort of captures that idea of what I think Cliff and Jason were alluding to, right? Of that, for those maybe who have traveled elsewhere but come back and see Masonry with new eyes, then maybe it's upon us to help our brothers in a way see things with new eyes. Because when you create that awareness or that awakening within them, I think you do stir something within their soul, right? You touch that inner part of their being, and then it comes down to them doing the work. So it takes it from being, okay, we're just going through these ceremonies because, but wow, have you ever considered this? And I think that's part of that. And then initiation is to start, but I also believe it's a journey, right? And we talk about rebirth and recycles and that. And I think you can come back to the same thing with new eyes over and over again. And it's that spiral evolutionary kind of thing for me. And, but what I came away was really thinking in terms of what is the mysteries of Masonry, you know, and that whether it's a port or a portal or whatever you use, then how do we get ourselves to pass through that on that journey, and then to bring others with us? Because one of the things I'm concerned, Michael, you mentioned earlier about the hierarchy, and where I've seen that go awry is when we get into the idea of gatekeepers, right? Or that you only have to be of a special bloodline, or you have to have this certain knowledge, or you have to have something. And I think what's beautiful about Masonry is that we take all men, the high, the low, the rich, the poor, and realizing that that essential spiritual element is within all of us. So we're all common and it's there. And we may go further in our journey. Our journey may take us in different places, but the fact is we can all build our temple. And that's something that I came away from this reading this time of Wilmshurst writing. So thank you.
And
Excellent.
if I could just make a quick
Yeah,
comment,
please.
you know, I understand reincarnation, but I kind of embrace the word reintegration a little more. I think that we are trying to connect to something that's already within us, that we once were a part of, was separated from, and we're trying to reintegrate ourselves with. You know, perhaps it's a little bit of that, you know, what Jung called the collective unconscious that's in all of us, and we're trying to plug back into it. But I think it's perhaps for me, less of a reincarnation than a reintegration and reconnecting with something that we knew previously, but we have become separated from.
I really love that train of thought, brother, and you know, gets into with the presentation of Demeter and Persephone, or you know, Adam falling out of Eden, or just the fall of man, which Wilmshurst also explores here. I think that's a really wonderful way of putting that, and a really great way to frame the approach to it as well.
Yeah, you know, there's also a part of the teachings in Buddhism and in some of the highest teachings of India called Advaita, which means it's Sanskrit for not to, is the ultimate realization. When you find out who and what you truly are, you realize you never had to reincarnate in the first place. Sometimes we have to go through all these things to realize we never had to go through all these things.
Brother Michael, I just want to comment to build on what Cliff said. One of the things in thinking about Wilmshurst, he said, looking at the deeper meaning of, for instance, Solomon's temple. And for myself, I've taken that to become a symbol of building my own temple, right? Mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and then becoming more of a sacred space or perfected space or a whole space or whatever word you want to use, that can become much like the temple became a temple of the spirit could enter, right? The same with us. but we perfect ourselves to reconnect, reintegrate to that source. So thank you.
I think someone from the chat, Deputy Grand Master, wanted us to address for Q&A. Brother Short mentioned various schools of mysteries. I know of the schools in Egypt. Are there others, non-African or Egyptian?
Yeah, the Samoth Ricasian, I want to say is how you say it, which was a mystery school that existed in a Greek island. We don't know much about it, but we do have historical contents that they existed. The Chaldean mysteries, which were the Sumerian mysteries that may have either predated or rose up at the same time the Egyptian mysteries were coming about. The grandfather of all mystery schools is really the Vedic mysteries or institutes, which were kind of like the Christian mysteries in a sense that they were exoterically presented. But you would have like a monastery with a guru and a process of working through the Vedas to reach a level of enlightenment. Mytheric mysteries, which were Roman, I want to say, and were largely followed by ancient soldiers. The Gnostics, which were another, I believe, another offshoot of Judeo-Christian ideology. The Etheric, I think, is another one that that comes from that same period, early kind of the later Greece. Or actually, I think the Ophiric mysteries, which worked off of poetry and instruction of higher philosophical and spiritual teachings, predated the Dionysian mysteries. And then, of course, you have Pythagoras, who brought his own form of mystery schools back to not Crete, back to his hometown, and I forget off the top of my head where that was. And he was said to have been instructed in the Egyptian mysteries as well. So there are tons of them, and these are just some of the surface mysteries that we know. As Michael had mentioned earlier, in around the 6th century Common Era, I think Emperor Justinian had eradicated the mystery systematically as the Roman Empire tried to unite under one unified government. But to answer your question, there's
There was also a Jewish mystery school. The Christians had, the Persians had. There was many mystery schools. Very good. Okay, so I think right, Marshal Bill, is now a good time to go to Q's and A's for or statements from the audience?
Sure. Why don't we ask our speakers if they have any, our guest
Yes.
panelists have any closing comments, and then we'll open it up to the Q&A.
Very good.
I would just like to say that, when it comes to, we talk about just now the mystery schools. I mean, I think there are many pathways that one can choose, but I think ultimately the destination is probably the same for most of us. So I would just say, pick one, pick the one that works for you, and follow it. And at some point, if it's no longer working for you, then, push it to the side and find one that does work for you. It makes no sense to keep, following a path if it's leading nowhere. So it's okay to, to change horses in the middle of the stream sometime if you want to go in a different direction.
Thank you, Right Worshipful Brother Jason. Closing comments?
Yeah, I'd like to leave it with that, masonry is what we make of it. And, it's not necessarily wrong if you're in lodge with a brother who doesn't really want to dig a little bit deeper. The way that they're practicing masonry isn't necessarily wrong. It's just what they need to do. And just the same way that for all of us, initiation is kind of like pointless if you don't have instruction. And then initiation and instruction is also kind of pointless if you don't have intent. And as Brother Cliff mentioned too, is just like there's something out there for everyone, and find something that works for you, find something that inspires you, and allow that to be the continuation of masonry, to allow that to be your greater mystery, and see where it takes you.
Very good. Okay, Brother Arcee, is this a good time to allow everybody to, brothers, just a reminder, this is not a title lodge, so govern yourselves accordingly. And if you'd like to say something, please be gentlemanlike, and it's okay to unmute yourself and start. If someone else is starting, like a gentleman, you give the right away. Very worshipful Victor.
Oh, thank you, my good brother. I'd like to make a couple of comments. As far as the craft of masonry guiding us to the mystery schools. Since this is not tiled, I'll just mention that within the first degree, we have a certain symbol that directs us to alchemy. And if you start that journey alone, you'll touch upon the other mysteries. Also, we learned about the trivium and quadrivium in a certain degree as well, or the 7 liberal arts and sciences. These are the lesser mysteries. The lesser mysteries which were taught in the ancient mystery schools were exactly what we now learn in high school, right? It's just going more into depth into them. The higher mysteries were the understanding of how the basic laws of nature are revealed and how they can be bent, not broken, to allow your will as man to be done on earth. And that leads me to my third comment, that I don't think the initiation process is for us to become more human, but for us to become more Christ-like, if you will, or more God-like, for us to understand, as Right Worshipful Illustrious Brother Caleb Jacob says, that we are reintegrating ourselves to our own divine nature, and removing ourselves away from, as we call the uninitiates, from the profane, of the things of the mundane world, and acquainting ourselves more with our own inner divinity. But it is really all there. It's veiled in symbols and allegories. So it takes the student from becoming a neophyte to becoming an adept. It takes study, it takes questioning, it takes surrounding himself with brethren who may be a bit more informed or even less informed, and having these discourses as he searches within the very same ritual, those symbols that are there that will ultimately reveal to his subconscious mind that same divine force within him. Thank you.
Thank you, very worshipful. Brother Renee, unmute yourself.
Thank you, Michael. Just a few comments. I just wanted to say that in the ancient times, the word mystery actually comes from the Greek muin, which means to shut your mouth, like to be quiet. Because in the ancient times, the mysteries were secretive. And like Plato, for example, when he gets the story of Atlantis, which we do get the story, he was under oath, so he didn't finish the story yet. So that story is allegorical, the story of Atlantis, because he learned that from the Egyptians. And another thing is that initiation means to begin, right? It's back in the ancient times, initiation was to teach you that death was an illusion. right? It's like in the Egyptian language, the Egyptians don't have a word for death. In their language, death, it means, they call it westing, because the sun sets at the west and then it comes back again in the east. And that's why the philosophers always, they worship the number 5, because 5 not only was the symbol for Christ, it was not only for symbol for Horus, but it was also the symbol of the 5 stages of man. It's like, the mineral, the vegetable, the animal, the human, and the adept, or the spiritual being live in this human experience, more of a spiritual individual. And that's why, and I always say that I always compare martial arts kind of with masonry, right? Like, when people come into the craft, for a great example, they get their master mason degree and they leave because they come in here in the craft and they're not getting what they want. It's just like martial arts. A lot of people get their black belt and then they think that, okay, I'm done, I'm finished, but not knowing that the Japanese word for shodan actually means the beginning. So when you get your master mason degree, it's just the beginning. Now the process starts. Your journey this is where the journey begins. And it basically, you're in martial arts or in masonry, same thing. You don't become a master of the art, but you become a master of yourself. That is the journey now, becoming to master yourself now. And that's why I always tell brothers when they come into the craft, now the journey starts. Go do your homework. This is where your journey begins. And that's where that saying goes, right? When the student is ready, the master will come.
That's
And that's
great.
all. Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
And to Brother Renee's part, the public ceremony of the funeral service for Masons, the most repeated phrase in that whole ritual is, "There is no death." Jonathan, you had some comments. Would you like to say a few words? Jonathan Maldonado, unmute yourself. Jonathan, you there?
Yep, I'm here. How's it going, brothers? Yeah, no, I was just basically saying before about he mentioned there's 12 grades. So everything is connects. We have 12 grades of schooling, and that's kind of like the minor mysteries, but it's also connects to the 12 signs of the zodiac, also to the 12 tribes of Israel. So everything is there. I think masonry, it's veiled, but you have to dig, you have to work. Nothing comes easily. You want to get your PhD, it doesn't come easy, it doesn't come overnight. No one's just going to hand you that piece of paper. So I think the same thing with masonry, same thing with the mysteries. You have to be tried and tested. And during the Egyptian times, yes, maybe they had trials and tribulations where they had snake pits where it was a little more dangerous. Now it's more mental that we go through, deciding not to watch the game and to pick up a book, or to really learn Hebrew or learn ritual rather than going out to a bar or watching a game. So it's there in society now. We do have to sacrifice some stuff, but we're doing the process. We're changing lead to gold, so it is a process, and gold only gets tried in the fire. So that's really all that I have for tonight.
Thank you, Brother Jonathan. Right, Marshal Bill, did you see anybody else that expressed an interest to comment or ask a question?
Right,
Worship Brother Ponytail.
Ponytail, yes. I was going to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, Marshal Ponytail.
Hi, it's Robert Remington. I love that phrase reintegration because it reminds me of what I discovered along the way. Talk about making a good man better. I suddenly realized how open my eyes were back when I was, say, around 7. And to come back with all the, say, book learning later on, to look up in wonder again. One could say that's kind of a rebirth, but it looks like it makes me feel as though I came to this world with a certain understanding and just had to relearn how to express it along the way, or re-see what I had seen before, but didn't quite understand. And it seems that not just in these mysteries, but in others, it seems to be that point of, if you just go to the allegory of the cave and so on, is what happens. You're looking, everybody's focused on the shadows where the real light is in the back of your head, so I think often what is happening with this at any level, it's that each person at their own pace pretty much. It's not like, oh yeah, you tick a mark and you get this. Yes, you do get degrees, but do you get the degrees as you go along? Some people get the degrees right away. Some people get it before they're a third. And then you have others that may be in for, several decades, and they're just getting it from somebody who just got it, so it is this thing of aren't we admonished to come in and pass everything on to the next one, and so on, and share alike. So everybody at their own pace. Some may want to come for the camaraderie. Some may want to come for something deeper. At times I've looked and I've seen people that are over-seeking. And it's interesting in as much as if you, reminds me of my sister when she was into Maharishi, handed my niece over to my mother and said, I got to do my GD meditation, totally kind of against what the purpose was at the time. Later on, she relaxed into her spirituality and realized that, it was there all along. She didn't have to seek it from some certain guru and so on. And I think that happens along the way for many to rebuild their own temple, as was mentioned before. I think that is, the key in the end. But I love where you guys have taken us with this, and of course, you, as usual, I say, you guys spin my noodle. Thank you.
Thank you. So right now, I got the high sign. What we will do now is Brother Bill Edwards would announce the next reading room. We'll have the closing remarks with himself and myself, and then we will have the final prayer, and then the Deputy Grand Master will give his remarks. Brother Bill?
Sure. So we have the next reading room on Sunday, October 29th at 7 p.m. And the author we've selected is Manly Hall, and we're going to be selecting a chapter or two from the Lost Keys of Freemasonry. That's on Sunday, October 29th at 7 p.m. will be our fall reading room. So we're looking forward to that. And I guess as my closing comments before I turn it back to Brother LaRocco is thank you everyone for joining out and coming and being part of our discussion tonight. This I know I have learned a lot from this, so thank you everyone.
Right, Worshipful Cliff, do you have a brief closing remark?
Yeah, I just have just a final thought, if I may. There's a rather mundane pattern to life and to history. And I think we need ritual and we need the mysteries to elevate our lives above that mundane pattern. And that's what ritual and the mysteries do. It elevates our lives above the mundane patterns of life and history.
So my closing remarks would be that there was a book called The Anatomy of Initiation. And what he says is that it is possible to be initiated directly but when you get initiated directly by the universe, because you have the desire to know, it's rough. The initiation is either divorce, loss of a loved one, loss of a respect of a child, loss of a career, loss of good health. It's better to go to the initiation. And the last quote I'd like to give is a quote that evolved through the mysteries and was articulated in early Christianity. And it goes like this. If you die before you die, when you die, you will not die. Now, brothers, if you could bow your head for the final prayer before we go to closing remarks from our Deputy Grand Master. take an attitude of prayer. Almighty God, we ask you to touch the minds and hearts of all here assembled, that we may follow in our every undertaking your infinitely wise plans. And as we're about to depart, we ask you to keep us under thy protective care until we meet again. Amen.
Would it be?
So moted be.
What an outstanding program this evening. I must tell you, my brothers, the panel, our co-hosts, it was really, truly wonderful. I mean, I think that we're all going to leave here just thinking about the conversation that took place. You see, the journey never ends just because your initials change before your name or the numbers change after it. We must always seek light. First, I do want to thank Brother Michael R.C., my Craftsmen Online co-founder, who many years ago during the height of the pandemic, trusted in a vision as we established Craftsmen Online, a place where Masonic thinkers and scholars will always have a home. So proud of Brother Michael's work on our podcast and the lessons that he shares each and every week with our brothers. I want to thank you, Right Worshipful Brother Bill and Very Worshipful Brother Michael, for co-hosting the reading room and for all that you do for our craft. Thank you, illustrious and Right Worshipful Cliff Jacobs, for your thoughtful commentary, and Brother Jason Short for demonstrating that it doesn't matter when you walked in through the inner door. What matters is what you do once you enter. So grateful for all of your thoughtful comments this evening. So proud of you all. I'm also grateful for all of you, the nearly 70 brothers who joined us this evening in search of further light, especially our return patrons, Right Worship Brother Robert Remington, aka Right Worship Ponytail, Brother Rene Perez, who is also a Craftsman Online contributor, and Worship Brother Lorenzo Caesar, who has attended many reading rooms in the past. My brothers, each of us are so busy governing our lodges, our districts, and our Grand Lodge, but we must never forget that the journey never ends. The search for love and light must always be our goal. So stay tuned for future reading room programs, and stay tuned for future programming from the Grand Lodge of New York, for I can tell you that I'm working with brothers on MasonicCon 2024 and sponsored by the Grand Lodge of New York, and other programming that, God willing, will expand all of our minds. So as we begin this July 4th holiday weekend, let us give thanks for our great country, for our first responders who keep us safe, and our men and women of our military who keep us free. God bless you all. God bless our country, and God bless our craft. Good night, everyone.